Hey everybody, how you doing? I've had some recent conversation with a couple of my viewers about sound levels during recording of races. The single biggest issue is the volume of your voiceover recording versus the in-game sound. So I thought I'd toss together this little guide that I can point to later when this question comes up again. Alright, here we go. Since most of you only record the in-car camera view, that is what this guide is going to be focused on here. Maybe at a later date I'll do a guide on external TV broadcast style volumes. I use OBS to record my iRacing videos, as I knew many do, so I'm going to be focusing on that. But if you have a different video recording software, you can probably work through the settings and find out similar settings as to what I'm going to talk to here today. Every race car has its own sounds, tones, bass, reverb, as you've noticed, and those cars act and sound differently on each track. For example, screaming down the backstretch at Talladega in a pack of 43 is a hell of a lot louder than on a short track cruising kind of in the rocking chair all by yourself. Every PC is a different animal, but there's some settings on your computer that we need to make to keep some consistency that we can use and build on later. I do not use headphones while I'm racing. I've got a medium or a low-level sound card from Realtek, and I have a pair of Edifier bookshelf computer speakers that have volume, bass, and treble rotary controls on it. Okay, first thing you want to do, and it might sound pretty academic, is set the volume on your PC to a certain level. Myself, I have it set at 100%. It doesn't matter what you have it set at, but just remember to keep it at that setting every time you record. Just cranking the PC volume that you can find in the volume in the taskbar up to 100, just leave it and forget it. Next up, you're going to want to find a video that you feel has some good balance and sound. You might be able to use this video here of my simple voiceover to try to find a bass line. A good iRacing video on YouTube to watch to get some of these non-recording, just playback sounds set is from Chad over at GeeLoorGaming. He's one of the guys I've been communicating with on sound over the last few weeks, and this most recent race in the ARCA car at Myrtle Beach, he just nailed it. Good in-car camera sounds, good voiceover volumes, so you can use his video as a benchmarker for the playback volumes that we're going to be setting here. The volume knob on my bookshelf speakers have indentations in them, so I have found out that 20 clicks is a good balance for me overall through all videos on YouTube and my videos and so on. So every time before I record a race, I turn the volume all the way down and then I go up to 20 clicks. You might have to draw a line on the speakers with a Sharpie or something like that. Find a good consistent volume that the output volume that you're hearing is consistent. Next up, whatever video player you use on your PC, for example, probably most of us are using the Windows 10 media player like I do. Get it, open that up, and then set the volume. Again, I go to 100%. It doesn't matter what you set it at, but when you're watching your videos, you know, to check for volume and all that, make sure it's set the same every single time. Along that lines, when you're watching a YouTube video, make sure that you have the YouTube player volume set the same every time. And again, I just use 100%. A quick note on the video player on your computer settings. Most of these players have a graphic equalizer option. If you've never messed with it, you know, I'd say just leave it the way it is. I have my equalizer at certain settings that I kind of feel is just a really good overall base for, you know, listening to music on the computer, racing, just tutorial videos and everything. And of course, a lot of videos are of across the whole different spectrum of loud and quiet on YouTube, so that really doesn't matter. But anyway, as you see what's going on here, consistency, consistency, consistency. Alright, we've got everything set on the PC, the headphones and the speakers. Let's get into the game. Here we are at the iRacing sound menu. In the device drop-down menu, make sure that you have your sound card selected. I think it's usually by default. Default is the actual setting. And while that should be your sound card, just select your sound card from the drop-down menu. I have surround sound checked, but I really don't think that does a whole lot with a 2-speaker system. And of course you can rotate the sound if you're wearing a VR headset. Next up is the slider bars under the sound levels there. And here you can see what I consider my basic settings. Note that I have the wind turned all the way off. Just clean up the sound a little bit. I never really heard the wind a whole lot, and I really don't need to hear the wind. I have the spotter pack, which is the Jimmie Johnson spotter pack, maxed out at maximum volume. It seems to be kind of quiet overall, so I just left that maxed out. Below that, you can see that I have some hotkeys mapped to louder and quieter. Those are on my Bluetooth 10-key keypad, and so you can see there it's the home button and the end button so that I can raise or lower the master volume in-game during a race. Over on voice chat there, you can see that I have a keypad, that 10-key keypad, plus and minus for louder and quieter on the voice chat. Now the thing about the voice chat is like you've seen, some guys just barely whisper and some guys are talking so loud you can hear them 4 counties away. You know, there's nothing you can do about that. Well, except to hit the mute button. Then of course on the lower right is the spotter. And as I mentioned, the Jimmie Johnson spotter pack at maximum volume seems to work for me, so I don't have any hotkeys mapped to that. But again, notice that you have a choice of the device there underneath the spotter. And of course in the voice chat, make sure that that is directed toward your sound card. A quick note on using the hotkeys to change the in-game volume during your race session. If you have an additional monitor that has supplemental peripheral things on it that you may click on with your mouse in the game, tire changes and stuff like that, you have to bring the mouse back over to the main monitor and click on it in order for those in-game hotkeys to work. Now we need to get in-game and in the cockpit. The best method is to load up a replay of a race that you have versus just you in a practice session all by yourself. It doesn't really matter what car you start out in, as you're probably pretty much going to have to do this with all cars, but Chad over at GeeLoorGaming, who I've had some recent conversation on sound volumes, has indicated that he thinks the Arca car is one of the louder cars that he drives. He also drives the Mazda, that's one of the quieter cars. I love the sound of the Gander trucks, so you know, pick a NASCAR V8 engine, if you will, to start out with, and like I said, if you've got the Arca car, that would be a good start. In this replay, get your car set up on the track using, you know, the forward buttons and everything to just before the green flag. All the cars together, bunched up, tearing into 1 and 2, and down the backstretch, no matter what the track. That's probably going to be one of your highest volume levels, and that's what we're going to be listening to here now. Using the camera selection tool, choose Cockpit. Unless you've changed the key mapping, Control-C should bring up the camera menu. Here we're only concerned about 2 things as far as audio volume is concerned. Make sure that is in cockpit is checkmarked. That should be by default. And then we're going to come down to mic gain. I think by default, if you've never been in here before, it is set at 1 dB. This mic gain slider bar is the single hands down most important setting for good in-cockpit volume. Here in the next gen Cup car, you can see that I have it set at 15, which is a little bit higher than most cars. This car just seems to be a little bit quieter. One of the loudest cars is the XFINITY car. And like I said, Chad's reported the Arca cars are pretty loud. So if you've not been in here and played with this, it's like I said, it's probably at 1. But I have found somewhere between 12 and 15 dB is a good baseline for most cars. Now remember, if you've got key mapping hotkeys set up for the master volume over on the sound menu, if you go up or down on that sound, that is everything. There's no way through key mapping to control just the cockpit sound. Save the camera file in the name of the car that you're working on. Hit Control-C again to get rid of the camera editing file there, and take a few laps in your replay there. How does it sound to you in the cockpit as you're just sitting there watching it? If it's too loud, hit Control C, bring up the camera edit menu again, and move that slider bar down. If it's too quiet, move that slider bar up. Remember to save the car. So you find a good overall volume level, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I'd just like to hear a little bit more engine. Well, that's where you can go over to the sound settings that we were at earlier and make adjustments there. Remember, the cockpit camera sound is what you are hearing as a driver overall. You can fine-tune the specific individual sounds in the sound settings menu. Now, what I have found in my experience with my sound card and my speakers is the sound in iRacing can get dirty really, really quick, where it's just a muddy, massive hum almost, and you're not hearing a blend of individual sounds. So personally, what I have found to be the case is keep the volumes as low as you can stand them, and we can play with that a little bit more in the OBS software, which we'll get to here shortly. But again, to have a nice blend of individual sounds, keep those sounds as low as possible in the cockpit camera setting here. You know, if you can get away with it at 10 dB, that's great. And then, like I said, making slight adjustments in the in-game specific sounds in the sound settings page. Next step, fire up OBS and get into the audio sound settings. Under the general tab there, you want to have it set at 48 kHz channels of stereo. You also have the option for 5.1 if you have that. Your desktop audio, make sure that that is mapped to your sound card. In the drop-down menu for mic auxiliary audio, click the drop-down menu there and then point that to your microphone or headset. I don't use a microphone, I use a separate microphone recorder that I then put into my video software, and I can actually adjust my volumes in the software. But since most of you guys are just recording raw video, you know, and using your microphone or headset or whatever, you're going to want to have pointed to that device, of course. Under the output menu and the audio tab, on all of your tracks, select audio bitrate at 320. That's the highest, best, clearest bitrate. Still under the output menu, shift over to the recording tab and make sure the audio tracks are all checked. There's 6 individual audio tracks, and I think they are all checked by default. You know, that's for different audios and all that, but just something to think about. If you don't have a 5th track coming in, then you got nothing going out on track number 5, so just check them all. Okay, we're done here. Make sure you check Apply. So here we are in the OBS main console, and under Audio Mixer, you see a graphic equalizer bar. And this one here on mine is called Desktop Audio. If you have an onboard PC microphone headset, you will see a second one there indicating that microphone. Just below this equalizer bar, you see the blue slider bar. This is where you can change the input volume from the game, what you're recording, to what the volume will be on the video playback. You can see that I have my overall desktop audio set at minus 6.9 dB. Now that means that the input audio that I'm receiving from the game is quieted down just a little bit. The best way to fine-tune this setting is load up that replay of the cockpit that we were using earlier and just have it running. You don't actually have to be recording with OBS, but you will see the equalizer bars dance. And the best thing to do there, you've got a lot of green, you've got a little yellow, and a little bit of red. I like to keep my max volume recording from the input of the game to just barely touching the red. You can even back it off just a little bit, but you don't want to be in the red. That's where, again, I say you get that muddy sound, that murky blend of just, you know, it sounds like white noise. So now you might be saying, hey Dave, we just had everything all set up, and now when we're recording, we're actually recording at a quieter volume than what we had set up, you know, in-game recording, playback, and so on and so forth. Yes, that's absolutely 100% true. I would rather put out a slightly quieter video on YouTube than a video that's just at screaming loud volume. And I've asked some questions and nobody's really commented to the otherwise. I think my volumes are overall pretty good. I know that when I play my videos back on YouTube, I have to go to quote level 25 on my bookshelf speakers in order for that to be a comfortable listening volume, whereas everything else, you know, the raw video when I'm editing it is a different volume. And that's just a matter of personal preference, that I like to keep the overall volume a little lower, because again, every device is different. When I watch my videos on my cell phone, holy shit, it sounds like a tornado siren going off. That's just my device on the cell phone. On my iPads, it's a different thing altogether. Again, it's all the different devices that you're playing back, and you're just trying to find a happy medium. Okay, and then now with the slider bar for your microphone input, again, the same thing. You can just have your headset on. You don't have to be recording actually in OBS, but you can just sit there and kind of talk to yourself as if you're in the car racing, and you can move the slider bar to set those equalizer bars so they're not pegged in the red and all that. And here's where it's going to be a lot of trial and error. And in the conversations I've had with some of my viewers, and I have found this to be the case for myself, one of the bigger things that you can do that sets a consistency for your audio is learning to speak at a consistent volume instead of whispering to yourself and going, you know, whatever. And of course, there's going to be some expletives and screaming and all that, so that's just going to happen. But learn to speak into your microphone, your headset, at somewhat of a constant level. And again, it's trying to keep things constant so you can have something to play with and make slight adjustments per car, per track, and per event. Well, there you have the basic settings as I see them. As I noted, every car and every track will have slightly different settings, but the key is to try to find a base that you can, number one, set the cockpit camera audio for each individual car, and then trying to find a consistent happy medium in the sound settings in the game, and then you can adjust those with the key mapping, raising and lowering the volume, and I found that works out pretty good for me. Now, there are times when it's kind of weird, just the truck just sounds totally different at Darlington versus Dover or whatever, and I will go in and adjust that cockpit volume just a little bit. The best time to do this is during an open practice, right before a race session actually starts. And it only takes a few laps before your ear can tell you, you know what, something's just a little off. And that's where you can go in and either mess with each individual sound setting real quickly, or that master cockpit sound setting under the camera menu. Alright guys, well, I hope you can take something from this. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and we'll see you next time.